I'm going to read both today's Emmett Fox and tomorrow's because they both relate to what I'm going to talk about. For August 30th, the title is The Tower of Babel, Genesis 11, and the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And Fox says, the story of the Tower of Babel is so simple, so concrete, and so clear that if you only heard it once when you were a child, you could never forget it. It is, of course, a parable. The word Babel means confusion. And this parable teaches that when you deny the omnipotence of God, and you do this whenever you give power to anything else, only confusion can follow. To be guilty of that sin is really to have many gods. And that was the characteristic fault of the heathen. Those who knew the truth about God worshiped him and him alone, and they received the protection and the inspiration that only the truth can give. At times, however, many of those who had known the truth forgot it for a season, and inevitably, things began to go wrong. If you should be in difficulties of any kind, it is certain that you have been committing the sin of the heathen in some way. It may be that at some point you have seen the higher and deliberately chosen the lower. Now, if you will turn back to God once more and reaffirm your faith in him, all will be well. And let me remind you that the Aramaic definition of sin is missing the mark. Okay, and then for tomorrow, the title for Fox's piece is Dwelling on Shinar, or Shinar, I don't know how you say it properly. The story of the Tower of Babel begins by saying that the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. That is to say, there was unity of thought and expression. Your faith was firm and dynamic. Then you allowed your consciousness to fall. And then from Genesis 11, and it came to pass as they journeyed from the east, they found a plain on the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. The plain means any kind of negative thinking in contradistinction to the hill or mountain, which stands for prayer or spiritual insight. The Bible mentions that they dwelt on that plain or in that state of mind. It is not an occasional negative thought that does the harm. It is the thought or the false belief that is dwelt upon that causes your trouble. Habitual wrong thinking, false beliefs, long entertained, build up a conviction, both conscious and subconscious, that we have to rely upon ourselves. Of course, nothing could be more discouraging than such an idea. And in its turn, it produces more fear. In the parable, these people got the absurd idea that they could reach heaven, in other words, regain harmony, by building a material tower. This describes the sense of insecurity and apprehension that has always been the greater part of mankind because they have not realized the presence and power of God and their essential unity with him. Then the account says that the Lord scattered the people abroad and confounded their language so they could not understand one another's speech. The confusion of tongues is a graphic description of the state of mind of those who have not yet begun to center their lives on God, for only fear and chaos can come to them until they do. So these are the two readings that proceed to what I'm going to be talking about and calling us to. This week, I have been weighed with the depth of pain, of terror, of distress, of confusion that we're seeing in the world as a whole. A friend of mine, I'm watching live almost in complete terror over this. And as I thought about it, I thought, you know, we as a community have an opportunity, have if I can, an awareness, a potential power that many people do not as they live in confusion, as they're not used to knowing the power of God. And I was wondering what we could do as a community. And I came across a quote from one of the books that I read an occasional piece from as I'm sitting on the porcelain throne. Wonderful place for picking up occasional pieces of information. This is from the book, The 7 Laws of Leadership by Charles T. Jones. And he says that one of his frequent prayers is, "Oh God, let me do one thing right before I die. In the meantime, Lord, help me to do something." And it was, So today, I am going to propose that this week, together, we do something to address the pain, the distress, the upset, the confusion that is in this world in huge quantities right now. So let's start with what are we going to address? I want us to take what we are comfortable with in terms of working outside the rational to bring calm where there is scare and hate, to remove the power of those who are intent on promulgating and expanding evil, to reduce the expectation of so many people that there's worse to come. And referring back to all the readings I did from Emmett Fox, The Tower of Babel, I want to focus on the idea that when we stay centered on God, there needn't be any confusion. It is when we lose the center, and this is what's happening to these people. People outside the spiritual community, I'm speaking the broader spiritual community, it's so easy to get caught in the carnal, if you will. Sister Pepper always talked about the carnal self versus the spiritual self. The carnal is the one that worries about all this stuff, gets bogged down to it. And then George Fox, founder of Quakerism, quote, that fits in, what can we do? What are our options? He has this quote: "Looking down at sin and corruption and distraction, you are swallowed up in it. But looking at the light which reveals them, you will see over them, and that will give victory, and you will find grace and strength. And that is the first step to peace." Now, the book, what's the name of the book? Oh, Love Without End, the woman who drew Jesus, painted Jesus' portrait and talked with him, talks about the frequencies of color, frequencies as the way we interpret. And she quotes a physicist who says that we need to understand when we see a color, when we see something with our eyes, we're actually not seeing the color. It's our eyes are receiving the sets of frequencies, and the brain is using algorithms comparable to the algorithms the computers use to create holographs. And those frequencies are what we are really responding to. So love and hate are frequencies. Another physicist says that reality that is frequencies in solid form. So what George Fox was just saying is, when you see over the apparent obstructions and focus on God's loving light, he reveals that these obstacles, these toxics, are in fact mere frequencies that can be walked through. And Jesus himself makes the point that what he's able to do in terms of changing solids. So we as followers, when we hold on to that knowledge, that connection with something other than the here and now, the carnal, so can we do. We have to anchor ourselves in that. Another quote from George Fox: "Be still and cool in thine own mind and spirit from thy own thoughts, whereby thou mayst receive God's strength and power to allay all blustering storms and tempests." Again, it's anchoring yourself in that which is beyond, allowing these frequencies to be our reality. And then from Love Without End, the book written by the woman who talked with Jesus while she painted him. And this was a quote from Jesus: "The key is to feel the troubles of the world while remaining in the true bliss of a heart that knows only divine perfection." So that's where we need to be. So, we as spiritual people are used to the idea of something beyond the here and now, and something that isn't just strange, mystical, or if you pray loud enough and long enough, God will finally do something. We can be part of this. We are part of this. We have that spark of God within. So this week, I propose to each of us here, and I will send this out to the rest of our community, that we spend a week using the fact that we are used to walking in the frequencies of love, the frequencies that allow the carnal problems to melt, to reach out and heal the world. From Love Without End, another piece. God is the source of all being. Beingness is supreme. The name of that beingness is love. In you too, beingness is above doing. The name of your beingness is love. And understand that we concentrated, anchored in the divine, in the frequencies of divine love. If we want to use the Hawkins scale, think of we're shooting for 400, 600, up to 1,000 in our walk before we even try to do healings with others. But when we walk in that and then seek to help engage with God to work miracles, and as I was writing this, I was reminded of what 20, 30 years ago, the Maharishi, who was involved with the Beatles, set up a campus here in this country. And that organization would send out groups of meditators to particularly troubled cities or areas. And they would go for a period of time, I think it was like 30 or 60 days or several months, and they would meditate every day for I don't know how long, but every day was a meditation. And they would monitor the results through studies. And the results were that while they were doing the meditation, the violence, the murders, the various forms of visible trouble substantially reduced in the areas where they were. I propose, folks, that we do this week in our own way. I don't know how many of you know Dr. Achin Choksi. He's the head of the ACE Integrative Medical Clinic here. But when he does talks, he starts out by explaining that everything in this world is frequency. And so when he's helping people to heal from multiple problems, he's looking at how do we hit the frequencies they need to heal? And we don't see that frequency energy directly with our eyes. We have to remember that everything that we encounter here is frequency. And therefore, when changes occur in someone, particularly someone who has been prayed after or been concerned, is that often enough, the frequencies, the higher frequencies of those who have been praying or concerned have reached into the apparent solidness of the troubled person's being and affected their apparently concrete being and lifted their frequency up. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the overall concept of the healing of shamans and how they do it. I often refer to it as moving to the shamanic side of life, where physical laws as we know them don't necessarily apply. Rocks can fly, you can fly. You can see, in my own work, sometimes I flip on the shamanic side of me, and I can see inside a person's body and see where the pain is because it's shining bright red, for instance. I'm proposing that whatever way you walk spiritually in a higher place, that we together carry a vision for this week. There's the mantra among Jews, modified a little bit for modern times. For a person of faith, it is no miracle when a miracle occurs. And so I propose that this week, we intend that we will meld together with the divine power to help a miracle for the whole world. Now, there's a bit of a caution here. Sister Pepper used to express concern to us. Be careful that when you are praying and others are praying for a particular situation, make sure that everyone's praying in coordination. Because if everyone's praying for something different, that's going to handicap the bringing about of the good that we hope to see. So I want to propose a vision, if you will, for us to hold. I propose that each of us in our prayer time this week go into our own process for shamanic healing, for spiritual healing, for prayer healing, whatever words fit for what you do to facilitate the working of miracles. And let us hold the same thing. So the vision I've been given is a knitted multicolor, I call it a handloom, I don't know what exactly, maybe a tea cozy that fits comfortably around our earth. Because every part of the earth right now, it seems, or at certain most of it, is in such turmoil. At first I was thinking, well, let's just do our country, but the turmoil, the pain is going to leak in from everywhere else. So we're going to put this wonderful tea cozy around the entire world. And the first thing is take 5 minutes to say the prayer of protection. Could be out loud, could be silent, while you're envisioning that this is not just for you, not just for your immediate environment, but for the entire world in this love, tea cozy of love. In the message, my announcement about the talk this week, you will find the prayer for protection. It did go out. If you don't see it, if you didn't get it, first check in your spam, because we were having conversations earlier that some people are getting my messages in spam. If you don't see it, call me. I will re-email it or text it to you. So step one, if nothing else, please, 5 minutes a day, say the prayer of protection. Those of you who are new to us, and that's most who are here, a couple of years ago, we actually tested the prayer of protection out in service. Phyllis served as our volunteer, and we tried 2 or 3 different forms of creating protection against toxic energy. And we'll use this as the exemplar. So you're familiar with muscle testing. We muscle tested. Phyllis was in good shape. Then all of us in the congregation, while she stood in the center, thought all sorts of toxic thoughts at her. Knocked her flat energy-wise. So we stopped it, and then we thought all sorts of good thoughts at her, and she was back strong. Then she said to herself the prayer for protection. And we thought bad toxic thoughts at her again, and she was untouched. So Phyllis and I, at this point, every morning, say the prayer of protection together for the day. When either of us leaves in a vehicle, we say the prayer of protection, or I do if I'm in my vehicle, she's in another one. Say it for 5 minutes. The unceasing prayer, if you will, holding our precious earth in your loving hands, that it is being prayed for the protection, the lifting up, the lifting away of all this low energy, toxic energy that is bedeviling us. Should you choose to do some more in the way of healing, read the excerpt from the second Psalm. I've also printed it out I think it was in a separate email to you. And I'm going to read it right now so that we're all in this. This Psalm is designed to facilitate our openness, increase our capacity for wisdom understanding. It says, "Incline your ear to wisdom and apply your heart to understanding. Yea, if you cry after knowledge and lift up your voice to understanding, if you seek it as silver and search for it as for hidden treasure, then you will understand how to worship the Lord and find the knowledge of God. For it is the Lord who gives wisdom, and out of his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He stores up hope of the upright. He helps those who walk without blemish. He keeps the paths of justice and preserves the ways of the saints. Then you will understand righteousness and justice and the uprightness of all good ways. When wisdom enters into your heart and knowledge is pleasant to your soul, intelligence shall preserve you, and the understanding of the pious men shall deliver you, that you might be delivered from evil ways, from men who speak perverse things, who forsake the path of uprightness to walk in the way of darkness. Therefore, you must walk in the way of good men and keep the path of the righteous." Now, I see I've got all sorts of typos in here. It comes from working too fast, I guess. But this is here for you to use too if you choose, for at least 7 days. Do part 1, part 2 when you feel like it. And any other time during the day, if you should find the illusion of the solid distress to get to you, remember what Reverend Frida taught us when she was doing her talks on prayer. The most effective prayer found by scientists doing tests is the very simple, "Dear God, thy will be done." So Let not yourself be moved into concern. Hold yourself in the higher frequency. If something threatens to distract you, remember, God, thy will be done. You release it and continue on your way, praising God, living in God's spirit, living in the higher path all day, every day, not just for the 7 days. So this is the challenge to us today, that we take this wonderful earth that we have been given and help it to heal. And if a nice multicolored tea cozy doesn't work for your vision of God's love on the earth, find something that will. I'm actually thinking that the Proverbs, and by the way, I read Proverbs as translated by George Lobson in his translation. There's other wonderful translations as well. Use one that you like. But I'm thinking that I will, from time to time, write onto the tea cozy those words from the Proverbs. So that is brought to our whole world as well.